Okay, I'm going to write this stuff down.
And then I'm going to put the first question in the answered so that you can find it. And it says, I'm a recovering sex addict. I've been almost 7 months since discovery, and only in the last 30 days have I been fully sober and living honestly. I go to 2 to 3 SA meetings a week and have read SA 101 and have 1 counselor session a week. And I'm going to start seeing an SA specialist this week. I've been having vivid sex dreams that are nightmares that are intensely arousing. They leave me feeling scared, anxious, stressed, guilty, ashamed, etc. These nightmares are extremely triggering, and I'm concerned about what this means about my arousal template. These are relatively new development, and I'm curious if there's anything I can do to begin avoiding having these nightmares.
I'm writing something down for this. Well, this is not an easy question to answer because, in fact, I can't fully answer it for you because I think you need a professional there with you to evaluate all kinds of things like depression or anxiety or sleep disorder or, and is there anything medical? I mean, when these kinds of things happen, we have to look at the whole picture. So I don't know you well enough to answer your question specifically, but I can tell you the things that come to mind. One of the things that comes to mind for me is trauma. That there is a part of you saying, okay, now that I feel safe, now that you're working on keeping me safe, like a little kid inside, now I'm going to start telling you some things that happened to me. And so there are parts of us that from the past that we start to get memories about her. And sometimes those come through in the middle of the night as some kind of nightmare, but maybe they're more a memory. And so the trauma piece might be something you'd look at. The other thing is just to say a lot of sex addicts have sexual dreams when they're working on recovery, and they get mad at themselves. So they say, I shouldn't be having this kind of dream. But Tammy will tell you that all addicts have using dreams. And actually, for like the alcoholic, it's a good sign that their brain is kind of trying to figure out, oh my God, what if I do this? And what does it mean? And so it's not unusual to have sexual thoughts and feelings come up related to the fact that we're changing our behavior and we've stopped being sexual and all that. But there's a part you said about scared, anxious, guilty, ashamed. It just feels more like something that very much upsets you and isn't in the average, like, oh, I had a sexual dream and I felt bad about it. So, a lot of this I think is therapy stuff. But Tammy, what are your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot. First of all, thank you for being here. Second of all, it's only been 30 days. In the last 30 days have I been fully sober. So you are like all of a sudden, like the other 6 months since discovery, you were still navigating, managing, and all of this. So I can understand why all of a sudden this stuff is coming up. And I have found for myself, when I'm trying to process something that's painful, I start having nightmares. And like it just kind of happens. And then as I'm processing through, like, I think it's the safe space to do that. And then, and I always talk to my therapist about this. And the other thing I noticed was I've been seeing a counselor. And with all due respect, most therapists are not trained for this specialty work. So I love that you're going to start seeing somebody who's qualified. So that will, I think, help. I think I'm glad you're here. I hope you're also joining the drop-in groups. There's a number, from what you're sharing, it looks like you're a male. So there are a number of male addict drop-in groups, Sunday night, Monday morning, Thursday morning, and Friday morning. They're all safe spaces. And right before Dr. Rob came on, we have a Sex and Porn Addiction 101 level 1 that will start again August 2nd. Those are all great spaces to be processing and writing and, not in a drop-in group, but, with the homework on the work group. And I think you'll start, connecting some dots on things that we'll take to your therapist, and your therapist will be able to help you make sense of it. That's my thought. Is my therapist always helps me make sense of, these, discombobulated dreams. So.
Well, what you're talking about is structure. By the way, the drop-in groups are all free. We don't charge for those. So,
correct.
Most of what Tammy talked about is there is no charge. We give that away. But what she's talking about is structure. Put people in place, put situations in place. 12-step meetings, more therapy. people you have to be accountable to, people you can call. Going through what you're going through, I think requires a lot of support. It's not something we can do on our own, and it requires really real support, like people who will show up for you whenever you need them to show up. So and stay with the safe folks. Right now is not a time to go have dinner with a family member who abused you. Protect yourself right now. Anyway, Tammy, can we move on?
Sure. Next one. I'm a sex addict, 11 months in recovery. My wife has intrusive thoughts and we haven't been able to be intimate sexually. What can I do to help her build intimacy in that way? Or how can we progress from this point? We both want to have sexual intimacy, but cannot because of the intrusive thoughts she has to deal with because of my betrayal.
I was just writing some stuff down, and I'm going to ask Tammy to finish this for me. But 11 months is not that long a time. And you said I'm 11 months in recovery. Have you been sober 11 months? Have you been a nice guy for 11 months? Do you understand what empathy is and how to display it and show it? So what I hear from a lot of spouses, and I'll go all the way across the board with you here to your side in a second, but what I hear from a lot of spouses is, well, he or she has stopped doing this, but they're still very difficult and they're still frustrating, and I still don't feel my emotional needs are met. And so being sober and in recovery doesn't mean that you know how to negotiate a relationship or help make an amends to someone that you've deeply wounded. So now I'm going to sell a book. I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse: A Relationship Saving Guide for Men Caught Cheating. And there are two of them. There's a Christian version and a non-Christian version. And these are, and I'm not saying this is where you are, but in terms of really having empathy and how do I make an amends and how do I apologize and where do I need to be coming from if I really am sincere, the book is really helpful. As far as intrusive thoughts, that comes from trauma. People who go to war and come home, they have intrusive thought. They hear fireworks and they have intrusive thoughts about bombs and war. They're watching a movie and all of a sudden, I've had spouses have many an intrusive thought, especially being sexual, thinking, what are we really thinking about them? Or they start thinking about what we were out there doing. And then, so intrusive thoughts are endemic or are automatic if you have a lot of trauma. So what she's going through is absolutely healthy and normal for her. I would just wonder how much support she has. And also just a little bit about your focus on helping her in some way. I mean, are you trying to build her up so you can be sexual, or do you want to build up because you want intimacy, or you just want to support her? Because I'm not really sure that you can do all of those things, or at least at the same time.
So, and I agree with everything you said. My first thought was, what was your disclosure like and how much detail has she had in? Was it discovery or disclosure? If you've had, and I know you just shared a little brief, snippet, but, are you both working with professionals like Dr. Rob talked about? What is hopefully her codependent aligned, support therapist, helping her with the trauma? The best thing that an addict can do for someone who's been betrayed is change, be that safe person, learn to be trustworthy. Dr. Rob's book, Out of the Doghouse, great book, and doing those particular things. But I really thought of, this sounds like one of those where, I shared all the gory details and now this is all stuck in my partner's head. When it's safe and when, trauma has been at least tamped down a little bit, but we talk often about like sensate focused touch, where it's not about the end game and sex and orgasm. It's about can we hold each other's hands? Can we walk through the park together? Can we look at each other's eyes and talk? That's real intimacy, not just sexual intimacy. So the doctors Ginger and Bill Burkaw did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sexual reintegration. So on Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast, you can listen to that for free. But that, has some helpful information too, but really it's building, step by step, not just, we want to have sex. So are you ready for the next one?
Yeah, but I do want to remind you, because we never say this, is that these folks know that all of these are recorded as podcasts, and it's betrayal. I'll never remember the name of our
Overcoming
podcast.
betrayal and addiction.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
and it
So
is
just
also on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. You can find all of them linked there. So
yeah, I just want you guys to know, like, if you think we're so brilliant and wonderful that you don't want to miss any of the other things, that pearls that have dropped out of our mouth, we have probably a year's worth of these conversations. And that's one of the reasons we don't record you, so that we can have the opportunity to help other people with this information. So
I have
anyway,
this vision of pearls scattered. It's a joke, believe me. Like we're here, we really care about helping other people. We've been blessed with recovery, and so we really do care about that. So if it's useful to you, fantastic. Like we always
if
say
it
in
pays
12
the
steps,
bills,
yeah, take
that's
what you need and leave the rest. So, okay.
okay.
Next question. I'm a betrayed partner. Husband is in recovery 1 year. I've asked many questions, but stay confused. I'm going to try and ask in a different way regarding lack of guilt. My husband states that for 9 years, he was engaged in the brothel life and affairs. He experienced no internal struggles about the decision to go to the brothel the first time, nor did he feel this every other time after. He felt no guilt doing what he was doing, and the sex was never a letdown. He was perfectly happy with the double life he was living. It did not want to stop. His only desire was to spend more and more time there, engaged in sex or not. Is this common? This lack of guilt, shame, and struggle about right and wrong? Maybe I'm sadistic, but I would feel better knowing he struggled and was in some pain rather than having the time of his life.
Well, just the last sentence. I mean, why don't you say something about that, Tammy? Because that's sad and
Yeah,
unnecessary.
yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, if he was miserable and struggling, it doesn't change anything. He was cheating on you. He was spending money and time at the brothels. He was living a double life. He had no thought or concern for you and the relationship while he was doing that. And unfortunately, addicts are very compartmentalized. So that would be a typical addict behavior, not an excuse, but that is it isn't going to help you. It really isn't going to help you, I don't think, feel better if you perceive that he was miserable. And he wasn't miserable. He kept going back there. So
Well, but I think you're right, Tammy. It doesn't help. I think this woman, but I think I understand the feeling, which is, I want them to know how much pain I'm in, and if they were just
yes.
miserable, then I feel like they'd understand what I'm going through. But people can have all kinds of reactions to what you're going through, and it may or may not be their own pain. But now I wanted to say something about the rest of it, which is what I don't understand and what we don't know. H in recovery a year. So first of all, Tammy, you're going to want to talk about this. This person says, I've asked many questions, but I stay confused. And I don't to me, that would be a therapy situation where they'd get the proper therapist and they'd sit down and ask some of these questions with structure, because a lot of the guys that I work with will say, you're saying all the same things my spouse said, but I never heard it until you said it. And often in therapy, we will hear things in ways that we didn't hear them from you directly. As a sex addict, so here's the thing: when we're doing it, there isn't any conflict. We are completely, as Tammy said, compartmentalized. A drug addict can use drugs and drink and then go home and pretend it never happened. And when they're using and drinking, they think this isn't going to hurt anybody, because as long as I don't have serious consequences, I want to have my cake and eat it too. We have issues, emotional and mental issues, us addicts. And one of the issues is we have learned to split our realities in half. And we put love and family and affection over here, or if we're able to develop that. And on the other side, we put intensity and passion and distraction, and we run back and forth. However, we don't necessarily sit in this world and think, oh, my poor family, or sit in that world and think, they are separate. But my question is, do they come together in recovery? Like, it's one thing to say, when I was acting out, I completely separated them and I had no remorse when I was doing it, but now, now does your spouse begin to feel like, oh my God, what was I thinking? And how could I feel happy with that looking back, because I now see what it's done to you? I mean, that's more than wanting to see this person in pain, that's what I would want to see coming from them, is an awareness of how they had hurt you, now that hopefully that hurting has passed.
Well, and that's the, everybody uses recovery like I stopped yesterday and so now I'm in recovery, and I just don't see that. The first, I had a friend, I still have a friend, but he always used the first 90 days is just abstinence. On day 91, then you can start saying you're sober. And I was like, oh, that's harsh. And he said, no, that's reality, because like it really is. It takes some time. And that's how, he went with it. So if this person, if your husband is, as Dr. Rob said, really starting to come around and go, wow, I can see how much it hurt you, even if he enjoyed the time while I was doing it, but he can understand the pain. That's recovery. That, then I'm going, yeah, I'm on board with recovery. If it's just he stopped doing the behavior, and as we've talked about on this before, it's like the dry drunk, where I'm still as nasty and rotten as I was before. I just am not doing the action that is problematic. Then there's not recovery. It's, recovery is about changing. So that was, and then the other thing, all the questions. I was talking to a partner, this is a few weeks ago, and it was in the context of a disclosure, and there was like 150 questions, and I about fell on the floor, and I said, I bet we could distill it down to 3 to 5. I bet they all have a common theme. I bet it isn't like all of this detail. It really is, this is, you're looking to find out, lying, that. So how do we distill so it isn't just the chaos of questions? Like, what do you really, what are you looking for? What is going to make you feel safe? And him being in pain while he's out, at the brothels, it probably isn't what you really are seeking. So
I actually want to add one thing to that, Tammy, because
please.
I was thinking, I like to always give drug and alcohol metaphors because I think they're helpful. And in this case, I was thinking about the mother who knows that her husband is out there driving, having a couple of drinks with their child. So he's had a couple of drinks and he picks up the kid at school, and she can smell the alcohol in his breath when he comes home. She might think, this man doesn't love our child, because how would he drink and knowingly, potentially put our child in harm? If he really loved her, he wouldn't do that. Well, no, he's an alcoholic. It doesn't mean that he doesn't love his daughter. It's just he's so impaired by this problem. And so when he stops drinking, the question is he going to be horrified with the fact that he did what he did? And is he going to, pray to the gods that he never hurt his child? That's, as what Tammy said, that's where I see the recovery and the change. Not in the fact that he drove drunk with his child. That's a horrible thing, but it doesn't mean he didn't love that child.
That's a great analogy. I'm going to remember
Thank
that
you.
one. Okay. What's your thoughts on if and or how trauma bond fits within an inability to separate or leave?
Okay. Trauma bond is an expression that is used in the therapy field about two people who seem to have issues that reflect each other, and they end up kind of getting involved with each other because their issues were, they kind of mirror one another's issues. So if people are bonded not only out of love and affection, but also as an attempt to, protect themselves from childhood issues, or play out childhood issues, or it would make it harder to separate or leave, because you're not just my wife, you're also my mom. You're also the person who molested me. You're also, we are so tied together in so many not healthy emotional ways that relate to our past, that getting away from each other also means, you see, if we separate, then I have to face my own pain. And if you separate from me, so it's almost easier to live in the pain of being together than it is to be separate, because then you really have to look at yourself. And it is safe. Tammy, I do the consultations, right? You guys know I do these online, and I just did one the other day. And I was listening to this spouse who the amount of abuse that she's taken just took my breath away. But the amount of abuse she had in childhood also took my breath away. And it wasn't surprising that she found someone that she trauma bonded with. I think what people don't understand is what is really the trauma bond, and what it is I'm not marrying my mother. It's not that literal. It's more like I'm involved with people or situations that remind me and are familiar to me growing up. So if I grew up with a very crazy mother, in fact, I did, I might pick a really crazy spouse. In fact, in the past, I did. And so that feeling of being able to be comfortable with crazy, and that is my norm. It doesn't really matter who I bond with. The fact is that I grew up with and I'm familiar with crazy. So another example is I worked in a lot of psychiatric hospitals on the way to this job. I mean, I cleaned up poop and lit people's cigarettes, and I had all those jobs, which, by the way, was very useful to do all that work, Tammy, in the beginning and learn every single job that in this field. But anyway, people used to say to me, how can you work in a psychiatric hospital? Oh, and then when I wanted more money, you could work a double, which meant, you worked 16 hours and you got time and a half of it. And people would say, how can you do this? All these people are so ill. And I'm like, it's not a problem for me. That's how I grew up. So, I can be comfortable in those environments, and I can be comfortable with people who others folks might not bond with. But actually, I see this as a good thing. That's why I wrote a book called Prodependence, because I think if you and the person you're trauma bonded with are both invested in growth, there is nobody better suited to support you in growth than the person who has the similar stuff as you do, but you both have to be committed to growth. Otherwise, it turns out not so well. Tammy, that was a lot of answer to a very small question.
No,
Do you have any?
that was really helpful. So no, I'm going to leave that one alone. I think you covered it great. So, okay. Next question. Can someone be a love addict and then become a sex addict? Or is it always a sex addict first, then a love addict? Are consistent crushes part of love addiction?
Well, can we take these one at a time?
Yes,
The
please.
one, okay, there's 3 questions. Pick one, Tammy, and then I'll pick
Well,
one.
I'd say start at the top. So can someone be
Okay.
a love addict and then become a sex addict? So
I don't think it's necessarily that black and white. I mean, I think there are folks, for example, I've worked with a number of sex addicts who found their ideal partner. I mean, they just has the most loving, exciting romance, and then they even maybe got married, and and during that time they had no desire to sexually act out, because the intensity, the passion, the escape they were looking for was in that person. But, and this is very typical, then let's say those people get together, one of them decides to have a baby. Well, then he's not getting, or the other person, well, he probably is not getting all that attention and validation. And all of a sudden they go acting out sexually because that love piece that was filling them up, now there's someone focusing on a child, not him. And so in my world, a lot of men that I work with will act out around the birth of a child. And of course, spouses are incredibly horrified. And I think I understand that, because you're focused on your body and you're focused on a child, and we want all your attention. And so anyway, I think it can go back and forth at the same time. I can think someone can be very passionately in a romantic relationship with an affair partner, and then start seeing sex workers. I mean, it really can be interchangeable. Do you want the second one, Tammy? Well,
I have a question for you as part of this is like, I mean, it isn't that they progress or switch between. I mean, there are people that are just sex addicts and don't progress or digress to love addicts. So I don't see them as, on a continuum. And I hear what you're saying, and I believe that there are people that go back and forth between if there's intensity. But I think that there's a number of people who are one or the other, or mostly. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, so I will say, and I to this person's thought, that I always thought about love addiction as graduate school from sex addiction, because as a sex addict, I was objectifying body parts. I was looking at your arms, I was looking at your butt, I was looking at, and then really for a sex addict, it's kind of like, if I could get that butt to be with me, then I'm powerful, then I'm in control, then I feel intense. And it really is about turning the person into a sexual object, whatever turns you on, if it's arms or legs or whatever, that's what you're looking at them for. Turning to love addiction is still using people as objects. You're still sort of shoving them inside of you to shut up your pain, but you really still don't see them. You're still looking to them to make you feel better rather than being interested in knowing them. But now it's not body parts. Now it's a person you're objectifying. So it's almost like, I think once you're focusing on a whole person, even if you're not truly connected to them emotionally, it's better than focusing on arms. So in that way, I do think a lot of sex addicts, well, single ones anyway, stop the sex addiction, and then they start to get into these crazy relationships. I will say one more thing though. There was a very well-known sex addict who married a very well-known person. And the news, I was talking to the press because sometimes they call me, and they said that this well-known person had said, now I married someone else, this person, and now I'm in love, and this is the best relationship ever. So now I'm not a sex addict anymore. And I think that's the kind of thinking that really doesn't work, because it's moving, it's apples and oranges. Anyway, Tammy, are
What
consistent
about
crushes
consistent
part of
crushes,
love?
part of love
I
addiction? So,
know. Sure. I mean, constantly dreaming and imagining and thinking, and it's nice to have a few fantasies, but consistent crushes, not so healthy.
okay, well done. Okay, so next question. Married 10 years, found out 2 years ago hubby cheated, has fantasy chats, lying, lots of porn. He attended our treatment program this year and appears to end the affair, but all other behaviors are the same friends. Should I be concerned? Yes. I'm getting to know my husband and I don't like him. Is this normal?
I don't like him either right now.
Yeah.
So I think people come out of treatment in all kinds of different ways. Some people will come out very motivated, and some of the alumni I see every week, boy, they're just so grateful for the lives they have. And a friend of mine had lost a friend of mine. That's how I sort of think of them. One of the clients that we work with had lost his ability to do something that was very important to him. And after 2 or 3 years, he got that ability back. Like, he got the ability to do something because he'd had enough time not using, not drinking, not acting out. So
Awesome.
it's wonderful for us to hear those who do well. And then there are those who walk out and say, well, I checked the box, I went to treatment, and now I'm going to go home and everything's going to be fine. And they end up right where they were. It's really across the board. And by the way, just to say something about treatment, the one thing that I can't manufacture or teach you is motivation. You have to want to get well, and you have to want to change your life, and you have to want it enough to take it with you when you leave. If anybody thinks that in 2 weeks, we or anyone else, or 28 days or 5 weeks, if you think we're going to meaningfully change the trajectory of your life without a commitment on your part, then we're just a blip. We're a nice vacation. We're a 2-week vacation from your life, and you learned a few things and you go back. But the real trick is the long-term stuff. So I just wanted to say that, because some people come back from treatment and they tell you that this is what was decided about what was okay and what was not okay for them sexually. Like, sometimes people will leave treatment and say, well, looking at porn really isn't a problem for me. I learned that in treatment, but it's the affairs that were the problem. And I can promise you that if you go through treatment with us, all of those things are a problem, and they are equally. So if I were talking to your husband right now, or he might even be here, it is completely unacceptable on every level for the fantasy chats and the lying and the porn. That has to stop. Why go to treatment unless you are committed to change, unless the reason to going treatment was to shut you up? And by the way, someone who is cheating in fantasy chats and lying, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure that the affairs have ended. I think I would not have that illusion, because he's lying about other things. Why would he? We want you to be only know what you know and not anything more. And if you think there are no more affairs, that's exactly what I'm going to want you to know. So, Tammy, anything else about that, or you do want to go right to I don't think I like him?
Well, I was actually thinking that, but it says, and appears to end the affair, but I'm with you. There might be another one that has started, or sex workers or whatever. I mean, who I wouldn't trust anything if he's lying and cheating and everything else. So, and I think it's fair for you to go, gosh, you have been kind and you put the relationship on pause and you waited to see if he was willing to change, and he's kind of telling you he's not willing to. So I think it's pretty clear. I mean, you get to decide, but at the end of the day, if this is the behavior that he's going to continue, and I don't believe that addiction stays stagnant. So if this is what he's doing when he should be in solid support and doing the things he's supposed to, he has an aftercare plan. As long as releases were signed, you were told what exactly it is, so that you knew what he can and should be doing if he wants to pursue recovery. So, so I wouldn't like that at all either. So
I'd like to see him go to our alumni group and
at the
sit with the
very
other
least,
35 or 40 guys who've been through the program. I mean, we've had more, but that's how many go to alumni group pretty much, and listen to their stories about how their lives are changing.
in a good way, not like, oh, I had to give up all the great stuff. It's like, no, this is the meaningful stuff. So he's hanging on to the
Well, and Tammy
crap.
and I, very once in a while, and I'm just going to go off topic for a second. I think it was, oh, probably 6 weeks ago, someone sent us a picture of their newborn, and said, "This is because I was able to be the man I've always wanted to be," and that's the kind of thing that really moves me about people who really do this work. And by the way, there are people who are not constitutionally able to be honest. There are people who are mentally ill, or they are so broken that they are unable to do this. And I feel sad for them, but I wouldn't stay with them. And by the way, I want to say one more thing. I like the fact that this person is stopping liking him. When you go out on a limb for somebody and you hope and you pray, maybe you spend a couple of weeks at home hoping they're going to come back for treatment, and then they come back and they're like this. I wouldn't like them either. I will say one more treatment center related thing. Once in a while, actually it happens probably regularly, there's a client or two, because we do a 2-week program, which I think is not like a lot of other places. We do it because we do it for lots of reasons, but we partially do it to make it more affordable. But however, it's not unusual for one or two of our folks to hear from us, you really haven't done what you need to do, and you weren't really here the first week, or you were still lying to us, or and we ask them to stay longer. 2 weeks is a minimum. It's not a maximum. We do up to 5-6 weeks of treatment, and I'm only telling you this because I'd be curious whether this person was told to stay longer, whether this person was asked even another week, and I'm not trying to sell treatment. I'm just saying sometimes the miracle doesn't. 2 weeks is an awful lot to ask when somebody is perhaps more really, really troubled, and we don't know that until they get in the door. I want to say one more thing about this. I talked to someone who ran treatment centers years ago, and he ran expensive ones, not like ours, but expensive ones. And he would have people leave the center, and some would stay sober, and some wouldn't. And I asked him, like, how can you justify someone spending a lot of money and leaving and still using or still not being sober? And he said, and I never got it. He said, well, if you read the research, it says that, people who go into treatment, when they leave, they use less. They use in less dangerous situations. They're more thoughtful about how it affects the people in their life. So does going to treatment for a week or two or a month or whatever, does it absolutely cure someone right away? No, but it makes them, many people it doesn't, but it makes them less likely to go where they were. And maybe they go back again, and then they get even less. Some of us need a lot of work, but to say that they went to treatment and they left and they weren't fixed, I don't think that's how I would look at it. I think that for some it's an advanced course, and for other people they won't get it at all. And just one more time, all this stuff is completely unacceptable, and he knows it. He went through treatment. He knows that looking at the porn is unacceptable. He knows. So he's deliberately trying to manipulate you into this isn't okay, and which is the road you went down in the first place. So I'm sorry to go on and on, but I'm invested because I don't know who this person is, but I have known them, and I feel like I want to shake them. So anyway, Tammy, I'm done.
Next question. How do you know when someone is just having affairs or has a sex addiction? Is there a way to know?
Well, that kind of goes like the last question. Yes, I would say so. But Tammy, why don't you go first? I think you have a thought.
On seekingintegrity.com, under resources, there's a self-test, and it's a quick scan. It's not anything like the comprehensive assessment that we do before treatment, before someone's coming into treatment, but it's a quick scan. So someone having a change of life, affair, maybe, but when it's a chronic problem, like it, and often when I start asking people, oh, he's having an affair. I think it's just affair. is he looking at porn? Is he drinking? Is he using cannabis? Is he gaming? I mean, like I start asking all those questions. Is he using food, in a compulsive way? Well, a lot of times there's more compulsive behavior. Or I had this recently too. Oh, he's been in recovery from alcohol addiction for X amount of years. And I'm like, ding, 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 probably more, going on with that. So, and oftentimes there's way more to the story. If it is just a one-time affair and it was what was I thinking? That's an affair. But to me, anything else really needs somebody to help it, peel back the layers and see what's really going on. The hurt, it doesn't matter from a partner standpoint. The hurt is real. The betrayal is real. Dr. Rob, I got to put a plug in for this. Your article on micro cheating just went on Psychology Today. And so I was thinking though about micro cheating and like, is there it's only a little bit of cheating because it's like only an affair. Well, it's not. It still is. You broke the trust in our relationship that, and the thought that I could be with this person and they were my person. So the betrayal is real, regardless of which label you tag on it. It's still problematic behavior. So.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Tammy. I was thinking about what would someone who's asking this question want to know? Like, what is it they're really asking? Because if we said, oh, just having affairs looks like this and sex addiction looks like that, how does that affect? You're going to be in pain either way. You're going to be hurting either way. I think, one of the differences that I see is that people who get caught up in affairs, it's really all of what Tammy said. I don't need you to repeat it. It's a very good question in the sense of how I would describe it and what's the difference. It really makes my head spin. There's a lot of stuff around that, but I really don't think that's what you're asking. I think you're asking is the person who's abandoning me at the 60-yard line, or did they go all the way to 100? But you've still been abandoned and hurt, and I don't even know if the affair is still going on. So I would be afraid that you would make decisions about your relationship based on whether or not they have a problem. Because I've seen a lot of spouses say, well, if it's an illness, if it's a problem, maybe I need to be there. And, I think it doesn't matter. Both of these things are a problem. And you have to take care of yourself based on what's healthy for you, not on figuring out, well, if they have this kind of problem, then I'll do this and that. You have to do what's right for you. And this is pain, no matter which way you turn or whatever you call it.
Next question. My 14-year-old just saw some emails from Weiss, which is the betrayed partner support group, on my work computer. Can you please help me approach her? What do I say to her?
So I think what this person's saying, Tammy, and I'll toss it to you, is that their child saw some emails that this partner, it looks like, probably it could be a man or a woman, found probably, talking about Steve, her husband. Well, Steve did this and Steve did that, or Mary did this, and what do I do about the pain I'm in about being betrayed? And this child saw that, and now they have information about things that were going on with mom or dad that they didn't know. And now they're holding this, and how do you talk to them about it? I think is what I'm reading. What thoughts, do you have thoughts about that, Tammy?
I think my first thought was, I sitting down with her and just saying, I'm sure you have questions. I'm sure that was difficult for you, and I want to hear what I want to hear from you, and I would really, invite you to not overshare. I don't think this is an invitation to go, well, let me tell you what Steve did, your dad did, or whatever. I think it's really important this isn't about you. We've got some struggles. We love you. We're really working on this, getting support for each of ourselves. We're the grown-ups here. We're going to work to figure it out. But I think really finding out, rather than talking at her, my first thought was like, invite her to share how she's feeling, making it a safe space for her to just, and not be wrong in whatever she is sharing. So, but you are the clinician. So what are your thoughts, Dr. Rob? So
I don't know. I mean, you're a mother, so I don't
I
think in this
am
case
a
that
grandma.
makes, we're equal there. But I would also want to know what she saw, what the child saw. If the child saw explicit pornography, or that their father or mother was having all this wild sex and there was descriptions of it, and I would feel differently than the kind of situation Tammy's talking about, which is they found out about an affair or something like that. I've people get arrested, people are looking at illegal things, people are doing all kinds of things. And I think the response from your daughter and what you need to do with her. I mean, if I saw Dad's a voyeur and he was arrested last week, I'd probably take my daughter to therapy, but that would be very different than, something much more typical. So a lot depends on what you saw. And by the way, is that the first time she was on your work computer? And has she had access to any of that before? And she's anything on your home computer? Because I don't know if you know this, but kids around 14 these days seem to be very tech savvy. And if I was a kid who'd found one thing, I would be at every other computer everywhere, and I would find it. So I'm just a thought.
Yeah, but I think that's a really valid thing to raise too, is, it isn't just the addicts that need, that we're trying to protect their technology. It's like, as betrayed partners, making sure that you're keeping your technology safe for your use, and so that kids who are curious, or just looking to use a piece of technology, stumble over something, that's traumatic for them. So, of course we want to protect them. So, and I mean, if something is really severe, then hopefully you have a good support therapist in a pro-dependent way for you, and you can bring it, possibly, I don't know, some therapists work with kids and some don't, but you can find good support resources if but I appreciate that you're asking and not going to just brush it under the rug. So okay, ready for the next one?
Yes,
SA husband has a hard time admitting things, accountability, and subsequently defends himself instead of falling on the sword and offering me safety reassurance. I constantly feel unimportant, unheard, and like he's just going through the motions of recovery, but not really engaging with therapist sponsor 12-step fellowships. Is it right to update my boundaries to require we address anything in the moment, or at least state that we will address next day? Issue is he ignores, avoids, thinking difficult tasks away, may go away, not giving it importance. Boundary to have him sleep outside our bedroom if avoidance is employed. Talking and asking isn't working. I just cry out of sadness. He apologized and the cycle restarts.
Well, Tammy's heard, well, many of you heard me probably say this before. I think that we have to give these issues a lot of importance in our day-to-day lives because they're hugely important. And you can't say, well, we'll talk about your affair on the weekend. It's going to come up every minute of every day. But it also isn't practical to sit down in a life where you have work and laundry and friends and, church or whatever. You can't just talk about this all the time, and you can't avoid it. So what I recommend, at least to the people I work with, is that they commit to a time probably in the evening, where, we're going to talk about this, or we're going to finish dinner or whatever it is, the kids are going to, whatever we do. And then we're going to spend half hour every single night from 7 to 7:30 talking about this, or maybe Sundays it'll be at 6:30. And we do that. And what that does is it creates a space for him to know he may not have much to say, but he's going to have to sit there for half an hour. And for you, it's an opportunity to not be so haunted every minute of the day by what's on your mind, but to be able to say to yourself, okay, I know we'll talk about this evening. And that way you don't have to feel ignored during the day. And quite honestly, some of the addicts feel like it's a question at every turn, and it never stops. And sometimes we need to set a boundary and say, let's set time to do this, not every minute of the day. So at both ends, I think it's a good idea to make it consistent and schedule it.
And what I also don't hear, and I know I do, yes, re-looking at boundaries, I mean, when things get better, they can get a little softer. So that boundaries are not forever, it's how do you navigate the next bit of time? What I don't hear is that he's working with his qualified therapist to work on being able to tolerate uncomfortable. I don't hear that you have support. I'm glad you're here, but I don't hear that you have a qualified therapist to support you through the trauma, to listen to you, so that grieving is real. And there's a group, it just had this thought on intherooms.com. Sophia Caudle has a grief group, but out of the sadness, like it is real grief to be not in the marriage relationship that you had hoped for, that he was supposed to be, that this life that you planned for. So I'm wondering about having some grief support, as one aspect of healing for you as well. So, but I would love to have you guys both working with qualified professionals, because it feels a little stuck too. But I love the scheduled time. I would say a couple times a week, 20 minutes, and it's a finite time, but whatever works for you. And it may be every night for a while you're cleaning things up, and then, okay, now we can do it a couple times, whatever. But the 24/7 where you're constantly waiting for the next, what's next, that's, addicts can really shut down with that, not making excuses.
Tammy, excuse me, do we know how long these couple or the addict has been in recovery in this question? Because
doesn't say. So yeah,
right,
it's either early or stuck, and I don't know which. So
because I laughed at the beginning of the question, I think at the end of the first sentence, and I want you to understand why I laughed.
Oh, almost 2
because
years. Almost
when you
2
say,
years.
Essay husband has a hard time admitting things, accountability, defends himself. I feel unimportant, unheard. This is every single relationship I've ever worked with an addict in early recovery. Now, by 2 years, this is not going well. And by the way, if this is someone who hasn't been through treatment, I will put in a plug for the program, because this is just the kind of person who we give a good shake to and help them understand what they're really going to miss if they don't start paying attention to their relationship. I have to tell you guys, like, for those people who come to treatment about relationships, and I think that's a potential of losing them, which is probably 75 to 80% of the people we see, or they don't want to lose their families. I think part of what happens in treatment, or at least the part that I really enjoy, is at some point they realize how much their loved ones mean to them. They realize, if they're doing the work and we're bringing them where they need to be, at some point they realize what they really have to lose. And there's excuse the word, cockiness that goes with being a sex addict, which is, oh, they'll stay with me and I could do this and I could do that and I can do this. And we do for a long time until it goes bad. And then we try to worm out of it. But by the time someone gets to treatment and they realize that this may be their last shot with this relationship, and maybe this is serious. So I guess what I want to say is this: I find in many of the addicts we work with a well of love for their families and a deep fear that they will be separated from them. And I have the same experience that a spouse said earlier, which is, how could you say you love us if you went and did this? How could you have this deep well of caring for us if you went and did this? And unfortunately for you spouses, in an addict's world, both things are true. So anyway, Tammy, I thought we should probably move on.
Yes. Last week it was implied that a high percentage of sex addicts would slip or relapse. It was inevitable. Surely with positive reinforcement, counseling support, etc., and using the tools they are provided in therapy, there will be those, yes, who are able to manage their triggers for the rest of their lives. And it's the question.
Yeah, I think that would be nice, but I think that, as I said before, addiction is a symptom of emotional or mental illness. And I know this because people who are addicted, it's a chronic condition like depression, like anxiety, like any emotional disorder, and it escalates under stress. So someone passes away, or we have a baby, all of a sudden people want to drink again and use again. So life is not, as much as I'd like it to be, a straight line. And the reason people are addicts in the first place is because they have a difficult time managing emotions and relationships, and stuff happens. So, and by the way, those of us who are addicts, and I don't mean to give us a pass, but you don't get this way without having some serious emotional and mental and psychological issues. None of us went through the dryer, in a healthy way. We all got wrung out some way or the other. I don't think that ever worked.
It was a dryer and a washer analogy, but we'll go with that.
Something. Thank you. But, my hope for my recovery is that with positive reinforcement, counseling, and support, that one day at a time, I will be honest, that I will be supportive, that I will love everyone I love to the best of my ability, that I will own my stuff when it happens. And along with all of that, what do they say, a daily reprieve, that I'll have a daily reprieve from the desire to go out there and do this. But I think that I'll say to you again, when you have a naturally occurring experience like eating, that becomes an addiction for some people, and why doesn't matter. They're addicted to food, why they're addicted to sex. We can talk about why all day. But the reality is that some people have addictions to naturally occurring pleasures, if you will. And so it is not the same as stopping drugs and alcohol. It's not the same as stopping gambling. Someone who has an eating disorder has to eat the rest of their lives. They have to go to buffets and they have to see all the pies at the holidays. And, it's not typical in my experience for someone with an eating disorder to just get it and then they never have an issue with food the rest of their lives. It's a struggle, maybe not daily, but over time. And the sex is the same thing. It doesn't go out of your life. You don't stop seeing sexual things. People are being sexual. You want to be sexual. And then to believe that will never run off the rails, I think is there's a word for it. I just wouldn't pin my hopes on it never happening again. And when someone uses that word surely, like surely if they do this, it feels like a plea to me, Tammy. Like surely if they just do this, it won't happen again. And, I think pinning your hopes on the person you love having integrity, being available, telling you the truth if they have this happen, working every single day on themselves so they can be a better person, that's what I would aim my focus on, and not have they ever had a slip. Because we have them.
And I have a little different perspective on this, and having struggled with an eating disorder, like I do believe that we can get a daily reprieve from this. And I do believe even under high stress, I can find better choices than just going and doing whatever was my problematic behavior with, alcohol and drugs is really black and white. It's don't use and you have, sobriety. Food is very different, and it is challenging, but for the behaviors that I struggled with, once I got it, I have not had that recurring. Have there been days when I wanted to go eat an entire chocolate cake? Absolutely. Would numbing out on food be a really fun choice in some moments? Sure. But on the other hand, and you've talked about this before, where you've been triggered with something and you go, oh, what does this mean? What is this really telling me? And it's useful information and I can choose to do differently. So, so I struggle even in 12-step AA meetings when people go, we're going to talk about relapse as if it is always inevitable. And I don't find, I know enough people who, have found, and maybe it wasn't actually, I don't think for any of us, it was the first time we decided we're going to, stop doing whatever it is. We had to get enough tools behind us to be able to move forward. But, once we did, there's so much support, there's so much information, that at the very, hopefully at the very worst, it's a little slip, there's accountability, and then, you move on. And it isn't like, oh my gosh, this person needs treatment again, type of thing. So go ahead. I can see your.
Well, I don't know how to express this in a way that, again, doesn't sound like I'm giving addicts a pass, and that I'm not in any way. But I think for the women who are listening, and for Tammy too, you're not men. And the difference between us is we have testosterone. And if you don't think that makes us much more sexual in a whole bunch of ways, look at how many male sex offenders are in prison and how many female sex offenders are in prison. It's like 93-7. And how many men commit sexual crimes versus women? How many women rape? So, I mean, I know that happens, but so what I'm saying is that it is a drive for us that can be unpredictable and a challenge, and we live with it in ways that I don't think women understand. I think the healthier we are, absolutely, we are able to manage it. And I've said this many times to Tammy, I don't think any of you are going to like this in particular, but I do think for men, monogamy is it's a challenge. We are not like you guys. We don't fall in love and then we never want to have sex with anyone. Well, you guys do, but can I say it's different? Men can be sexual without any kind of emotional connection. And that's much harder for women. We're the ones who go to strip clubs. We're the ones who do all of this non-relational sex. So there is a part of us that can go out and be sexual without really even thinking about what we're doing, because it's really just about sex in our minds, you know? So anyway, I'm saying a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't mean in any way, Tammy, to dismiss the commitment to recovery or I do think for men, to not just simply do something casual or impulsive sexually is different than women. And that doesn't mean that we can't stop or we shouldn't stop, but I think it's more likely that we'll have a slip than a woman might, for example.
I appreciate the elaboration. So we have
Let's
time
take
for
one
another
more because
one.
we'll be fair. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, both. I'm a recovery sex addict with nearly 4 months of sobriety. In the past 2 weeks, I've started having a lot of dreams where I act out relapse and waking up in the morning feeling I think this is a repeat.
Well, it's close enough to a repeat.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pass on that one so we can get to another one. Okay. Shoot. There it is. I read Inner Child by Eddie Caparucci, in which he mentions how anxiety and stress can lead to sex addiction, and I can personally resonate with it. I've been a porn addict since age 18, and it started with stress because of exams and failure. I'm now 35 and recently started on anxiety medication, Prozac, which has stopped my triggers and it's helping me be sober. Does this mean anxiety and depression were not root causes of my porn addiction, and managing those will help with resolution, I think?
Well, I have anxiety and depression, and I can tell you that without medication and support, it was much harder to stay sober, because my feelings weren't just this or that, they were overwhelming, or they were really difficult to tolerate. So I absolutely agree that for those of us who have underlying issues, we have more, if you excuse the word, control or ability to manage it when we are also not dealing with depression and anxiety and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that I have not seen the case that depression and anxiety are the root causes of sex addiction. What I see is what we grow up with and what we're challenged by, combined with our genetics, can lead to depression and anxiety. Or there are people who are born with a propensity for being depressed or anxious, but that doesn't mean they're going to be addicted. So addictions are seen for some people as self-medicating. They use that word, self-medicating, and some people do use addiction to tolerate depression or anxiety, and they have less a desire or need to use or act out once they're feeling better. But and so in that case, to answer your question, yes and no. Anxiety and depression were not the root causes of an addiction, and managing anxiety and depression will help with the resolution. I want to say one more thing, Tammy, just to everybody before we close, which is, first of all, take what you like and leave the rest. You know, I am not here to tell you what's really going on in your life. I've never met you. I don't know you. You know, so the situations that we talk about are general, even when we ask us when specific questions are asked. And the second thing is, I don't lie, and I don't lie to you. So I'm not going to be someone online who says, oh, all our programs cure people and they never act out again. Or if you meet me, you know, I understand what this journey is. It doesn't mean that everyone wants to be on it or everyone can tolerate it or everyone, and I'm talking about loving us, being involved with us. It is not an easy task. It was not an easy task when we're acting out. It's not an easy task when we're sober. We're challenging people, or we wouldn't have all these problems. So, but I really work hard to give you the reality, you know, that it takes years to be a better person. It doesn't happen in 3 months, you know, that we may slip for a while until we get a period of recovery. Not all of us, but so all I'm saying to you guys is you may not like my answers. And if you don't, feel free to just, you know, not take them. But I ain't going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you this isn't any easier road than it is. It isn't. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge worth taking, and a challenge that can be amazingly hopeful. But it ain't perfect because we're very broken to begin with. So Tammy, I hope that's okay. I just wanted to,
I'm not
defending
I appreciate
myself.
that. No, but and I agree with you that, you know, I think the hardest time, particularly for those that don't have the ability to come and get really good help at unpacking the underlying wounds that you know, that's what we do. That's what you and the clinical team does, you know, at our treatment program. And I think that there's so much ahead of the curve if they're able to do that. But otherwise, the hardest part is when you're trying to stop doing whatever it was you're doing, not switch to something else that's going to be equally problematic or almost as problematic, and you don't have the tools to live differently. It's so uncomfortable to be living in your own skin, having to deal with unpleasant, uncomfortable emotions and people and all the realizations, and not knowing that there's tools that you learn in recovery and support that you have. It's hard. So I always want everybody to have the best shot at, you know, at getting the benefits of what, you know, what we learn in recovery. So, but it's a journey, and it doesn't, you know, it comes with doing some work. So.
And I want to say one more thing to your point, Tammy, which I just, part of the challenge for the spouses, you spouses, is the issue of betrayal. Because if you were married or committed to an alcoholic who stopped using, they would be a jerk for a long time. They would struggle with empathy and compassion, but it wouldn't be so personal. You know, there is this sense, you betrayed me, and how could you act like that now, when surely now you can be a better person? Well, if I knew how to be a better person, I would. So, but that's more understandable with other substances or behaviors, because it's not like you betrayed me, or what is it about me that made you do this, or don't you realize how that affected me? It's a whole different level of being very personal, as it would be for spouses. And so I think it makes this curve of how come we haven't gotten better faster more intense for you guys, because you're so hurt, understandably, and it's so personal. So that's probably usul, Tammy, huh, to talk
No,
about that.
I agree. And unfortunately, with someone who stops drinking, half the time they're using porn, gaming, they're doing something else. And it's just like, well, that's not as bad because they're not, you know, they're not driving the car drunk. And I mean, so it's really challenging. And I say this all the time to people who, you know, reach out to us, is like addressing the underlying issues, because otherwise you're just switching from one thing to the next or relapsing in this. And it doesn't help. We aren't happy, joyous, and free, which is a 12-step program thing. We aren't happy, joyous, and free unless we're able to let go of all of those, you know, compulsive things that, you know, keep us chained. So on that happy note, recovery is amazing. I'm incredibly grateful. And thank you, Dr. Rob, for being you and being here tonight.
Am I going to be here next Monday, Tammy?
No, you're not.
Okay.
We have a surprise guest.
Okay. I'm
More
looking
will be
forward to that.
revealed. Yes.
All right. Talk to you.
All
You're a
right.
mystery.
I
Talk to you later.
I'll be
Bye.
here. Come see me anyways. All right. Bye.